In today's video, I'm going to be talking about reflections in video games. I began to take a keen interest in this because of how modern gaming approaches similar effects. It's nothing new, as this can be traced back to Super Mario 64 and possibly before that. Not that modern advancements are bad, but nothing will ever be traditional methods. They do not impact gaming performance or depend on expensive graphic cards. That being said, I'll start with traditional methods. In Grand Theft Auto 4, you have reflections. This game released on PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, and PC. I am using the PC version, and despite the criticism made against that version, it's the only one I've got. So anyways, the reflections were good. You can look in different directions and the reflections mirror it. It also applies to objects in the background too. The game is not perfect, as you will see. Bullet marks are not reflected. I could shoot here on the door, go back to the mirror, and that won't be shown. The real world has those marks, but none of it seems to be in the mirror. There was also some weird lighting going on the reflected object as well. No idea why this is happening. In certain angles, the view gets distorted, and at the right positions, you can see some textures flickering. I also played around with the mirror and had fun with it. I was able to look past the mirror by being able to walk up to it and shift the camera. The world behind the mirror looks incomplete and void. Unfortunately, particle effects are not reflected. The smoke that comes from the grenade explosion will be visible from the real world, but the mirror will not reflect it. I also play with fire, and it does not get reflected either. It still can hurt you, as Nico can get damaged, and even then, Nico catching on fire won't be properly reflected. Speaking of which, Batman Arkham Origins has reflections that would mirror your movement too, albeit in a few segments that have mirrors. In the Mad Hatter's side quest, enemies spawn from the mirror but have no real world counterpart. It's a clever way to use reflections because it was all an illusion, and this adds more to it. The game's reflection is pretty good, but does not mirror everything. No particle effects, no sonic batarangs, no items, and no shadows either. Although the segment is an illusion by the Mad Hatter, details have been forgone. Grand Theft Auto San Andreas has reflections too. I am emulating on PC SX2 to be transparent. I played around a bit and noticed how the pink light does not appear either. Certain weapons also look strange when paired up against the mirror too. You could actually see some of them clip into the mirror, yet not reflect properly. Also, particle effects are not reflected either. I threw Molotovs in the closet, and the mirror won't reflect any of that fire. Also, Carlos Johnson being set on fire will appear as him just standing still. I should disclose that I am not a gaming developer, and that I'm just a regular person sharing his opinion. Anyways, it is a neat illusion that works around the console's limitations to give us this feature. Plenty of games have utilized this method to add to the in-game world. It doesn't get used often because I began to realize developers do what they can to not include it. It does have its limitations because doing it on a much bigger scale would affect the gaming performance. But then I began to look at other reflection methods where it is used more of an aesthetic. Batman Arkham Knight has puddles and polished surfaces that would reflect the light sources but not outright mirror everything as it should. This game does this a lot. The polished surface don't show Batman, but the reflected light sources are a neat touch to make this game look graphically advanced. Take a look at this surface, and look how the light above it is shining. Looks great, doesn't it? Also, traveling the streets in Gotham have similar reflections when looking at the wet floor. These type of reflections are not next-gen super high detailed, but the fact that developers added them shows they care. They want the game to look its best, and the graphics still hold up even though the game released almost 10 years ago. I mentioned this form of reflections because other games have used similar tricks as a way to give certain surfaces a desired texture. The way developers included them was focused around the console's capabilities, which is why ray tracing is completely different. Traditional methods are still practical, but have their limitations because it is not fully accurate. Aiming for 100% accuracy would definitely impact performance when a gameplay's fluidity is the biggest priority. Ray tracing, on the other hand, is supposed to be the next step in reflection technology. Some recent games have used ray tracing to its full benefit as an optional feature, while traditional methods are still in the core game. Spider-Man is a good example of this. It has reflections throughout the game, and that is without ray tracing. Those reflections however, are not accurate. Let me explain. Some buildings have their own reflective surface which are inaccurate to their surroundings. For example, at this building where I'm at, you can't see all these buildings behind Spider-Man in the reflection, but then I turn around and you see the water, sky, and boats. Turn on ray tracing and the surface properly reflects the surroundings behind Spider-Man. You could see the water, clouds, bridge, and boats properly reflected on the building glass. Grime and blur effects are added too. I traveled to a different building that will reflect the water, sky, clouds, and the raft. Ray tracing is off here as well. Here's where it gets interesting. Take your time and look at it because this building at least tries to be more accurate despite the missing notable landmarks like the bridge and city across. Still not perfect as it looks like the ocean. Activating ray tracing becomes interesting as the building's reflective surface changes. Much of it no longer reflects to the same capacity because it has shrunken down. The building's surface changed and I thought ray tracing was going to make this better. It did not. The reflective surfaces are so small that I can't fully enjoy this feature. The grime and dirt returning does not help either. I went to a different building and it does the same incorrect illusion as the first building. Once I turn on ray tracing, the reflection is accurate and it's fantastic. Although the dirt and grime make a comeback yet again, the reflections accurately showcase the world without any reductions. The same thing can be expected in Miles Morales where buildings could have improper reflections. Where I am at, I'm between two buildings and obviously the glass does not reflect that at all. Turning on ray tracing will fix this. I tested out particle effects and the results are dependent on the detail level settings. High settings won't replicate the particles or the cardboard box junk on the floor. Setting it to very high will. The difference in these settings make a difference in the quality of the reflections. The Miles Morales game doesn't do it completely either. The holograms have a reflection but aren't a one-to-one match. Other particle effects are there but not fully accurate either. I could not see the placed mines at a certain distance. Changing the settings from high to very high did make a difference in that regard. Back to the other Spider-Man. I played around with the webbing and results are disappointing. The webbing wasn't accurately reflected. The reflections feel like a pale comparison. The impact hits but look choppy as it disintegrates and the webbing doesn't show on the surface. Although, the webbing does appear on the floor, even then, it doesn't look like a full one-to-one reflection either. In Miles Morales, a similar outcome happens. I have seen the webbing up close or at least the impact getting reflected. Results do differ because webbing may appear depending on the surface and a lot of surfaces in this game doesn't allow webbing to appear. To quickly summarize, results are the same as the previous Spider-Man game. One cool detail though, Miles having no reflection while invisible is very fitting. I feared the mirror would have reflected the transparent outline but it didn't. But it does make me question if the developers selectively chose what could be reflected because of it. Comparing traditional methods to ray tracing shows that the advancements are there. It factors in more resources like lighting, shadow, and particle effects. Or at least this is what I would say if I hadn't played Nukem Forever. Whatever the previous examples did not do, ray tracing did. Ray tracing reflecting lighting, shadows, and particle effects were showcased with Spider-Man. Traditional methods apparently can do that too, because it is possible in Nukem Forever. I played with the turd and the poop stains were reflected. I mean, just look at this. It's disgusting and magnificent at the same time. So are the bullet marks whenever I shoot. I tried to make a smiley face here and the mirror makes a reflection of that. Keep in mind that Grand Theft Auto did not do this at all. So seeing the bullet marks reflected here in Nukem Forever was a surprise. Shadow was also reflected. This was not reflected in the other past gen examples as well. I did not see that in Batman Arkham Origins or Grand Theft Auto. The electricity and light from the machines are also reflected. Guess what? Other games did not reflect similar effects. Even the particle effects from the bomb get reflected too. I could see the smoke in the mirror. Again, the other examples did not do that. So if anything, if whatever that Nukem Forever did, it just adds more credibility to the claim that whatever gets reflected is merely up to the developer's discretion. If Nukem Forever could pull off everything, then it proves that traditional methods are still practical. My PC is not the top of the line hardware, and both Spider-Man games deal with lag and loading should I turn on ray tracing. I could have fluid gameplay, but I'd have to change my settings as a compromise. On the other hand, the traditional reflection methods don't affect gaming performance as they were implemented with the limitations in mind. Lower end systems and older consoles have utilized those methods effectively for decades and don't depend on fancy expensive graphic cards to do it. I don't mean to downplay ray tracing, but it is overhyped. I'm not convinced that it is the future because games have done fine long before it was implemented. I'm sure with enough creativity, whatever ray tracing can do, traditional methods can keep up. If anything, I see ray tracing more of a novelty just to sell higher-end PCs and pro consoles. I also noticed many games in recent years are overly dependent on resource usage, something that ties in ray tracing as well. I could go on, but at this point, everything I need to say has been said. So if you haven't, make sure to leave a thumbs up, comment down below, and as always, thank you for watching.